Leave the floor wet? Alright, enjoy your rotten wood. First time posting here because I just remembered this incident. Back in the early my mother, 40F, worked as a cleaner for a couple places and took me, 13M, with her to help. One place we worked for was the only real estate place in town. We cleaned up before the people who worked there got in. When I started there it was small and somewhat dirty. Old smelly cubicle partitions in faded brown, off-color walls, ingrained dirt in the linoleum. We cleaned and I literally couldn't tell the difference after we were done. Except the mirror in the washroom not having any spots on it and the floor being wet from the fresh mopping. Then the town started becoming a cottage town and it is decided that they will move to a nicer place. Cottagers might find the griminess a little off-putting. New place had a bit more space. Brand new blue cubicle partitions. Newly painted walls that still smelled the first day I cleaned in there. And a cheap hardwood panel floor. That floor was a bit of a problem. See, before, when we mopped, we would just leave the water to dry on the linoleum. We could do that because we got there at 630H and they opened at 730H. The place was small enough that it was mopped by around 700H before we left and would be mostly dry by the time people arrived. If we did the same thing for this cheap wood floor, my mother was worried we would have water seep into the cracks between the wood panels and rot them. So a new method for mopping was devised. First I dunked the mop, then wring the mop lightly. Mop up, wring the mop again but fully this time. And then mop up as much of the excess water as possible. This new method actually visibly got a lot more water off the floor. By the time we left, some of the earlier mopped areas would look mostly dry. Good solution, Mom. Couple weeks into the new place my mother gets contacted by the manager and a new order comes in that we are not to dry the floor. I asked if she explained why we dried it. She had. I found this order a bit baffling at the time and it only occurred to me today the reason why he ordered this. The manager got in earlier than everyone else at about 715H. So I actually saw him a few rare times when we ran late. The old floor would have still been visibly wet in the old place when he got in. The new floor was now dry when he got in. Ipso facto, we must have decided to skip mopping to leave early. Even though I didn't understand at the time that he thought we weren't doing our job, I, of course, found this new order stupid. I thought, he wants the floors wet when he gets in. Fine. Cue malicious compliance. You see, I did the mopping while my mom cleaned the washroom because I was young strapping lad and she was Mom, so I did what she said. I now had a standing order from the boss to leave a wet floor and by gum, it was gonna be sopping. From that day forth, not only did I not dry the floor, I now didn't even wring the mop after dunking it. I dipped it in the water and just let water slop off of the mop as I pulled it directly out of the bucket. There was no way this was gonna dry before he got in. Probably not for an hour after he got in either. 2 weeks after I started doing this, lo and behold, the wood paneling is already starting to separate at the seams. Dirt is accumulating between tiles. It proves impossible to remove. I was a bit shocked at the time at how fast that had happened. 4 weeks into the new mopping routine, the floor was rotting. Was my mother psychic or what? It was apparently very cheap fiberboard with a paper-thin plastic, wood grain, pattern on it. I would have guessed a laminate, wood grain, on top of semi-waterproof fiberboard if you'd asked me. 4 weeks ago. The floor now had visible divots and lines where the plastic paper sank into the deteriorating wood underneath. These trapped dirt in them as well. How classy. The floor, not even 2 months after they had moved into the new place, was even worse than the old beat-up linoleum one. At this point I asked my mother if we should start drying the floor. And wouldn't you know it, she had already asked. The answer was no. Leave it wet. Baffling. We cleaned there for another month or so. I barely felt safe walking on the floor as it was a now tripping hazard with warped parts popping up. It was also disintegrating. Splinters of wood would pop off every time I swept. The floor now had the dubious distinction of being the worst floor I had seen in a place that wasn't dilapidated. TLDR. Manager says to leave floor wet after mopping. We do. The floor rots, warps, and disintegrates. Nice one. I have to wonder though, was there never any feedback because of that rotting, warped, ugly floor? Manager and or employees clearly would have had the same issues moving across it as you and felt it was unsafe and unhygienic. Guess that guy went to a top-notch manglement university then. Didn't want to go back on his previous order and accepted his fate with the destroyed floor. Any clue if the floor got changed at some point? Great story. Customer never said anything? Cottagers might find the griminess a little off-putting. Tell me you're not British without telling me you're not British. Is it legal to have 13-year-olds work in Canada? This is the sort of result that happens when you prioritize the appearance of productivity over actual productivity. Reminds me of how, in the USA, cashiers aren't allowed to sit on the job. It tires them out more, which leads to them making more mistakes and burning out quicker. But it sure does make them look more productive with how they're always standing at attention. Barf. A wet floor doesn't necessarily mean you mopped. You could have just poured water on the floor to get the same effect. Manager was a complete idiot. This isn't malicious compliance as much as it is incompetence all around. You do not ever wet mop laminate wood flooring. The end result you describe was going to happen no matter what. You only hastened as a bit.
If you enjoyed this video, please check out our playlists full of similar content. Epicaricast is like doom scrolling for your ears. Please like, share, and subscribe.